Okay, so as you all know, huge day for Ripple, huge day for the entire crypto industry, as we're going to get the HINMAN documents, the HINMAN emails. Now, Stuart Alderati has a great thread here on Twitter. We're going to go through this, and also stick around to the end of the video because I've got a video to show you that kind of outlines everything related to HINMAN. So I know a lot of people trying to get up to speed on what's going on, why this is such a big deal. This is going to be a very comprehensive, pretty long video here that outlines exactly how we got here. And we're going all the way back 5 years ago since Bill HINMAN gave his infamous speech. And through the SEC's lawsuit against Ripple and 7 different court orders, we can finally share what happened behind the scenes through the now public emails and drafts of the speech. This came out early this morning from Stuart Alderati. So with all of that being said, let's dive into the Twitter thread first, and then we're going to share the video, and then also Brad Garlinghouse chiming in as well, the CEO of Ripple. So all of that going to be in this video. So he then says, we now can all see HINMAN ignored multiple warnings that this speech contained made-up analysis with no basis in law, was divorced from the Howey factors, exposed regulatory gaps, and would create not just confusion, but greater confusion in the market. Now, keep in mind, Bill HINMAN at this time worked for the SEC, and they were talking about crypto. They were talking about, are they securities? What are securities? What are commodities? How do we differentiate this asset class? So he goes on to say, a refresher, HINMAN, as head of the SEC's corporate finance group, gave a speech in June 2018 declaring that a token is not a security once it becomes, quote, sufficiently decentralized. And he invented factors to consider when making a quote-unquote sufficiently decentralized determination. Wasn't very clear. But that's why you're seeing all of these different altcoins trying to be decentralized. Why we've actually talked about what makes Bitcoin, Shiba Inu actually, and Dogecoin very different is they are truly decentralized. What does that really mean? There's no governing body. There's no CEO. There's no person you can, knock on the door and say, hey, are you home? We need to talk to you. There's nobody there. It's controlled by the people. Now, furthermore, although HINMAN claimed that the speech was his personal view, he and the SEC touted it as guidance, and he was speaking on the SEC's behalf. Then SEC Chair Jay Clayton publicly pointed to it. He said, despite the SEC repeatedly flip-flopping on the significance of the speech itself in litigation, it remains on the agency's website, so it must be a pretty big deal. And there's a reason why they didn't want this information out, right? Think about it. He says, now let's look at what senior SEC officials directly said to HINMAN about his speech as he was drafting it. Head of Trading and Markets said, because the list of factors is so extensive and appears to include things that go beyond the typical Howey analysis, we have more concerns that this might lead to greater confusion on what is a security. HINMAN ignored these concerns, even though they were legitimate concerns. TNM directly asked HINMAN to tie his newly invented factors, quote, more closely and explicitly to the Howey analysis. Again, HINMAN ignored this suggestion altogether. How about the quote? Advice from the Office of General Counsel? They called this factor legally irrelevant. They say, has this person or group retained a stake or other interest in the digital asset such that it would be motivated to expend efforts to cause an increase in value in the digital asset? HINMAN kept it, never changed it. TNM and OGC noted HINMAN skipped over the threshold jurisdictional question of whether a digital asset meets the legal standards of a security. He jumped to asking whether SEC oversight could, in HINMAN's view, be beneficial. HINMAN again ignored this regulatory gap. Now on June 4th, HINMAN wrote that he didn't see a need to regulate Ethereum as a security and would call Buterin later that week to confirm our understanding. On June 12th, OGC expressed its reservations about including a statement directly about Ether in his speech because it would make it difficult for the agency to then take a different position on Ethereum in the future. ETH remained as a cited example. So, what should happen now? Well, first, remove the speech immediately from the SEC's website. This is, again, coming from Stuart Alderati, a chief legal officer at Ripple, over 35 years of experience legally. He then says an investigation must be conducted to understand what or who influenced HINMAN, why conflicts were ignored, and why the SEC touted the speech knowing that it would create, quote, greater confusion. And finally, HINMAN's speech should never again be invoked in any serious discussion about whether a token is or is not a security. Unelected bureaucrats must faithfully apply the law within the constraints of their jurisdiction. They can't, as Hinman tried, create new law. This is all coming from Stuart Alderati. Now, let's go all the way back up to the front end of this and listen to this breakdown in this video. This will give you a better understanding and a better idea because everybody's kind of a different type of learner. You can kind of watch some of this rehash, but also they add some other nuggets here. And I'm going to turn it over. Check out this video, and we'll be back right after this plays.
On June 14, 2018, then SEC Director of Corporation Finance William Hinman gave a high-profile speech where he declared that a token is not a security when it becomes, quote, sufficiently decentralized. But internal emails and documents show that senior SEC officials repeatedly warned Hinman that his speech wasn't true to the law and would greatly confuse the markets even more than they already were. Now, after more than 2 years and 7 court orders, we can finally share some of what we found in the Hinman speech documents. The SEC head of trading and markets warned Hinman that he was making up factors that, quote, go beyond the typical Howey analysis, as in not in the law, and that the speech could lead to not just confusion, but greater confusion on what is a security. Hinman ignored him.
If the network on which the token or coin is to function is sufficiently decentralized, and the purchasers no longer have a reasonable expectation that a person or a group is going to carry out essential managerial or entrepreneurial efforts, those assets might not represent an investment contract.
The same official told Hinman he should tie his speech, quote, more closely and explicitly to the Howey analysis. Hinman not only ignored him, but deliberately created factors beyond those identified by the Supreme Court in the Howey case.
I wanted to just note a few things. This list is not meant to be exhaustive, but these are things that we look at.
The SEC's own general counsel warned specifically that it's legally irrelevant if someone retains a stake in a token and is motivated to take action to increase its value, and that Hinman should delete it from the speech. And once again, Hinman ignored them and said without any legal support that it was important to ask.
Has that person or group retained a stake in, or other interest in the digital asset such that it would be motivated to expend efforts to cause an increase in the value of the digital asset?
Both Trading and Markets and the General Counsel also disagreed with Hinman's belief that if a network was sufficiently decentralized, information asymmetries would no longer exist, noting that a network creator would likely have more information than a retail holder, using Vitalik Buterin as an example. They warned Hinman that by creating this, quote, other category and focusing on information asymmetries, he was exposing a regulatory gap that the SEC may not have the jurisdiction to fill. Again, Hinman ignored them.
As the network becomes more truly decentralized, the ability to even to identify a promoter or to make the requisite, and someone that could actually make the requisite disclosures becomes in many cases difficult or and perhaps much less meaningful.
On June 4th, Hinman wrote that he didn't see a, quote, need to regulate Ether as a security, and set up a call with Ethereum's co-founder, Vitalik Buterin, later that week to, quote, confirm our understanding. On June 11th, the SEC's own general counsel advised against including any direct statement about Ether in the speech, because it would be difficult for the SEC to, quote, take a different position on Ether in the future. The next day, Trading and Markets wrote that the statements about Ether were, quote, likely to create more confusion. Hinman ignored all of them and decided to make headlines, picking winners and losers instead.
Moreover, putting aside the fundraising that accompanied the creation of Ether, based on my understanding of the present state of Ether, the Ethereum network, its decentralized structure, we believe current offers and sales of Ether are not securities transactions.
The emails show that Hinman knew he wasn't following the law. He knew he was making things up. And he knew that his speech would result in greater confusion in an already confused market. But Hinman went ahead with the speech anyway. And the SEC, despite knowing all this, touted the speech repeatedly. The SEC chairman himself pointed market participants to the speech.
Bill Hinman recently outlined the approach we take to evaluate whether a digital asset is a security, and I encourage you to take a look at Bill's speech, which is available on our website.
The SEC knew the speech didn't follow the law. The SEC knew the speech would create greater confusion, and the SEC knew Hinman was making things up. So why is the Hinman speech still on the SEC's website? Why was it ever allowed to be given at all? And why has the SEC pushed a policy of regulation by enforcement, falsely insisting the rules are clear? On June 14th,
Okay, so very, very interesting there. And it is interesting that this is still on the SEC's website amid what's going on with this lawsuit. And there's a reason why they didn't want to toss this over, because this speech that was made back on June 14, 2018, it is not really played out the way that they had hoped, right? And it is interesting that, here's the other thing. They've allowed the markets to get so much bigger since 2018. They've allowed the markets and they've allowed exchanges, Coinbase and Binance, to get massive, with no regulatory clarity, and now they're ruling with enforcement, right? I don't think that's just by happenstance. I think that's by design, right? They're taking things down that have gotten too big, right? And what they did here in 2018 was on purpose. I mean, it's very, very clear. They pretty much laid things out in a way that produced more uncertainty, right? We have evidence that Coinbase, just in the last year, has tried to reach out to the SEC on 30 different occasions, to seek regulatory clarity, to seek answers, to find out, hey, are we doing things the right way? Guess how many times the SEC returned their phone call or returned their email? 0. And now they have a lawsuit the SEC does against Coinbase. So what's going on here? Think about it, right? And here today, I think marks a huge stepping stone in this Ripple versus SEC lawsuit. We've been mentioning this since we started the YouTube channel way back in 2021. This is not just a XRP Ripple versus SEC lawsuit. This is much bigger than that. Brad Garlinghouse has said this as well. And speaking of Brad, he's actually responding to Stuart Alderati a little bit here on Twitter here today, and I want to bring you up to speed on what he said in response to Stuart Alderati's thread here. And if we go over to, let me zoom out here. I just had it up, but let me see if I should be able to backtrack and find it here. Where the heck is Brad's comments here? Let's see. Okay, let me just go to Brad's page because that's somehow trapped somewhere in the replies here. Brad Garlinghouse, let's see. And here it is right here. So he says, it's absolutely unconscious. Wait, what is that word? It's absolutely unconscionable. Conscionable. That's a good word, Brad. That a regulator, when presented with so much pushback on what he was about to say, how he compiled this fake test in the first place, decided to move forward anyway and throw an entire industry into chaos. For the SEC to sue me personally for allegedly selling unregistered securities when their own division had deliberately created confusion about this, well, I don't have a single polite word to describe this deplorable, politically motivated overreach. He says, seeing the depth to which the SEC has essentially weaponized the lack of regulatory clarity through enforcement actions since this speech was given, it's no surprise that we can call bluff on their claims to, quote, just come in and register as nothing but in bad faith. So, it seems as if the settlement could be closer than ever after a huge day here for Ripple. We'll see how the market responds. We'll see how XRP and the rest of crypto respond. We could take a quick look at it real quick, actually, before we head out of here. XRP is down slightly on the day, but did have a big pop in the price, actually, all the way up to about 56 cents before dialing back. We'll see kind of how this plays out the rest of the day. More will come on this story for sure, so make sure you guys are locked in. If you like this video, let me know down below by hitting the like button, subscribing if you haven't already. I know it was a rather long one, longer than usual, but a lot to unpack here with the HINMAN versus SEC, or HINMAN plus SEC versus Ripple XRP. All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. We'll see you in the next one.